Cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer. American serial killer and cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer sexually abused and dismembered 17 men. When authorities stopped Jeffrey Dahmer for the first time at a checkpoint, they had no idea what lurked beneath his friendly and appealing persona but a dangerous serial killer. Moreover, a cannibal. In actuality, he was transporting one of his victims' corpses in the trunk of his automobile that exact day. Letting him go with simply a speeding ticket was a mistake. Another 16 guys were lost because of this carelessness. In actuality, it signaled the start of an unmatched necrophiliac orgy. On May 21, 1960, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born in Milwaukee to middle-class parents. He often stated that nothing out of the ordinary happened to him as a child to explain who he became. As opposed to other situations, like Ed Kemper, there was no mistreatment or sexual abuse. Dahmer struggled to connect with other kids since he was a quiet and lonely little boy. Although he was an animal lover, he eventually developed a taste for dissecting deceased animals to see what they were like inside. Homosexuality was frowned upon in Bath, Ohio, the community where he spent his formative years. Dahmer became conscious of his proclivity toward men at that point. The issue was that in his fantasies, men were consistently unconscious or motionless. Additionally, he had created a link between sex and violence. His actions and future behavior would be affected by this. Dahmer was conscious of the abnormality of these kinds of ideas. He started consuming copious amounts of alcohol, which led to his discharge from the army and the university. He enlisted at the direction of his father. Alcohol could not quell his powerful emotions, and neither could the mannequins he kept in the closet to represent dead people. His grand ideal of having a sweetheart who was subservient gradually came true. He set out to find a man to take home, drug, and kill so he could have sex with the corpse and then eat portions of it, but he knew he couldn't do it consensually. He did this. The images of the various stages of the process of dismembering corpses he was carrying out that the police discovered in his flat serve as proof of it. Because of this, he became known as the Milwaukee Monster or the Milwaukee Cannibal in the future. At the age of 18, after being abandoned at the family home for several weeks, he committed his first murder. He picked up Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker, and drove him home. They consumed alcohol and drugs, but when Stephen tried to leave the house, Jeffrey restrained him by swinging a barbell at him. He dismembered and disposed of his body the following day. He carried out his second murder in a hotel room 8 years later. After inducing unconsciousness in Stephen Toomey using sleeping drugs and meeting him at a neighborhood tavern, Jeffrey discovered Stephen's body the following morning. He asserted that he was unable to recall the events of the previous evening. After deboning the animal, he retained the skull as a memento. Up until his arrest, he committed more murders, including 2 in 1988, 1 in 1989, 4 in 1990, and 8 in 1991. He used to keep the tools and portions of his victims' bodies so he could masturbate to them while thinking back on the killings. He admitted in multiple interviews that he consumed pieces of his victims' bodies so that they would be part of him. They had multiple opportunities to catch him. He interacted with the police on a number of occasions, but there was never a cause for concern. Conorak Synthesomphan, a 14-year-old Laotian who was one of his victims, was drugged and sexually assaulted on one occasion, and he then made the decision to go out for drinks at a bar. Conorak, who was still in a fog, recovered consciousness and made it out of the apartment while Dahmer was at the bar. The cannibal had drilled a hole in his head for a trepanation and then poured acid into his brain. Among his fantasies was keeping his victims alive in a permanent submissive and unresistant state. Dahmer discovered the youngster, who was hardly able to speak, sitting naked on the pavement as he was preparing to head back to his apartment. Police officers encircled him, and they were all in a state of shock. When Dahmer approached, he was successful in persuading the officers that Conorak was both his boyfriend and intoxicated. They had faith in him. In addition, they assisted him in returning to his flat. They might have noticed that there was a dead corpse in the bedroom if they had just entered the apartment or paid closer attention to the foul smell inside, which was noted in a later inspection report. Conorak was instead left in the hands of his executioner, who later strangled him. Many of Dahmer's victims who had been sexually assaulted managed to escape his grasp. However, the police showed no interest when they reported what had occurred. As a result, Dahmer was able to ignore those who managed to escape his grasp because they weren't a threat to him. Tracy Edwards, who had been bound by Dahmer, nevertheless, managed to escape from his residence in July 1991 and halted a passing police patrol. They didn't realize the scope of the discovery until they started searching the residence. The remains of 11 persons and images of eviscerations were found. Dahmer kept skulls in cupboards, organs in the freezer, and heads in the refrigerator. A 215-book can of acid, 3 human torsos that were rotting, and blood were all present in the room. In America, there was a major commotion following this finding. The fact that none of these murders had been reported was the most distressing aspect. Indeed, no one had noticed the victims, which made it even more difficult to connect Dahmer to the crimes that were being discovered. Dahmer admitted to killing 17 people. In actuality, there was undeniable proof against him. Whether or not he had a mental problem was the subject that was brought up the most during the trial. Dahmer had demonstrated enough evidence that he knew exactly what he was doing and the moral and legal ramifications of his conduct, so the defense didn't have it easy.